Chapter 1. The Dismissal. The fluorescent lights in the Millbrook Police Department buzzed like angry wasps as Damon Velez sat across from Police Chief Ralph Clayton. The missing person report lay crumpled between them, torn in half by Clayton's meaty hands. Damon's jaw clenched as he watched the pieces flutter to the floor like dead leaves. "Your coward son is probably AWOL," Clayton sneered, leaning back in his chair until it groaned under his bulk. "We're not wasting resources on some runaway soldier." Beth Clayton, Damon's ex-wife, stood behind her father's desk like a sentinel, her arms crossed and lips pursed in that familiar expression of disdain. Her honey blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite the early morning hour. She'd always been beautiful, but now that beauty felt cold, calculated. "He's probably just drunk somewhere," Beth added, her voice dripping with casual cruelty. "You're overreacting, Damon. You always were dramatic." Damon's hands remained steady on his knees, though every fiber of his being screamed for violence. At 45, he'd learned to mask his rage behind a facade of calm control. His dark eyes fixed on Beth, noting how she avoided his gaze, how her fingers trembled slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Matt's been missing for 3 days, Damon said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of barely contained fury. "He was supposed to report back to base Monday morning. He never showed." Clayton's face reddened. "Listen here, Velez. I don't care what sob story you're peddling. Your boy was always trouble, just like his old man. Now get out of my office before I have you arrested for harassment." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Damon rose slowly, his 6-foot frame unfolding with predatory grace. He'd spent 20 years in special forces before transitioning to private security, and every muscle remembered the lessons of violence and patience. "I see," Damon said softly. "Thank you for clarifying your position, Chief Clayton. Both of you." Beth finally met his eyes, and for a moment, something flickered there, fear, perhaps, or guilt. But it was gone before Damon could analyze it further. "Don't come back here with this nonsense," Clayton barked. "And if you harass my daughter again, you'll regret it." Damon walked to the door, his movements deliberate and controlled. At the threshold, he paused without turning around. "You know, Ralph, in my experience, the people who refuse to look for missing persons usually have something to hide." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the autumn air bit at Damon's skin as he walked to his black pickup truck. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a few patrol cars and Beth's silver BMW. A gift from her new boyfriend, no doubt. Damon had seen the man once, briefly, during the custody exchange 6 months ago. Gregory Joyce, some hotshot lawyer from the city with soft hands and an expensive suit. As Damon climbed into his truck, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your son is closer than you think. Some fathers don't deserve their children." Damon stared at the message until the screen went dark, his reflection staring back at him in the black glass. His face was carved from granite, marked by years of combat and betrayal, but his eyes burned with an intensity that would have made lesser men step back. He started the engine and drove away from the police station, but not toward home. Instead, he headed to the outskirts of town, to a storage facility hidden among the pine trees. Unit 47 had been his secret for 2 years now, ever since the divorce proceedings had revealed just how little he could trust anyone, including his own family. Inside the climate-controlled unit sat boxes of documents, surveillance equipment, and other tools of his former trade. But what Damon needed now was in the locked file cabinet at the back. He pulled out a thick folder labeled Clayton Family and another marked Joyce, Gregory M. Most people thought divorce was about dividing assets and custody arrangements. Damon had learned it was about intelligence gathering and preparation for war. He'd been watching, waiting, documenting, because he'd known, even then, that this day would come. The folder contained photographs, financial records, phone logs, and surveillance reports dating back 18 months. Damon had hoped he'd never need to use them. But as he spread the contents across a folding table, his mouth curved into something that might have been called a smile if it had contained any warmth. Beth thought she knew him. Clayton thought he was just another broken ex-husband. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Matt's disappearance wasn't random, and Damon was going to find out exactly what had happened to his son, even if he had to burn down half the town to do it. Chapter 2. The Foundation of Betrayal. 3 years earlier, Damon had returned from his final deployment in Afghanistan with ghosts in his eyes and a bronze star he never talked about. Beth had seemed genuinely happy to have him home, throwing herself into his arms at the airport with tears streaming down her face. Their son Matt, then 17 and eager for his father's approval, had stood beside her beaming with pride. For 6 months, Damon tried to pretend everything was normal. He took a job with Blackstone Security, one of the most exclusive private firms in the state, specializing in executive protection and corporate intelligence. The pay was excellent, the work challenging but legal, and it kept him close to home. Beth seemed pleased with their new life, their beautiful house in Millbrook's most exclusive neighborhood, and the respect that came with being married to a decorated veteran. But Damon had learned to read people in places where misreading meant death, and he began to notice the small signs. Beth's phone face down on the table during dinner. Hushed conversations that ended when he entered the room. The way she flinched when he touched her unexpectedly. The truth revealed itself on a rainy Thursday evening when Damon returned early from a canceled assignment. He'd parked in the garage as usual, but something made him enter through the back door instead of announcing his arrival. The sound of laughter drifted from the living room. Beth's laughter, bright and musical in a way he hadn't heard in months. Through the partially open doorway, Damon saw his wife curled against Gregory Joyce on their leather sofa, her head on his shoulder as he stroked her hair. Joyce was everything Damon wasn't: smooth, polished, untouched by the brutalities of war. He whispered something in Beth's ear that made her giggle like a schoolgirl. "He'll be gone for 3 days," Beth murmured against Joyce's neck. "We have the whole house to ourselves." Damon stood in the shadows of his own home, watching his marriage crumble with the same clinical detachment he'd once used to observe enemy positions. He didn't feel anger in that moment. That would come later. Instead, he felt the cold clarity that had kept him alive through 2 decades of combat. He backed away silently, left through the garage, and drove to a hotel. That night, he began planning his divorce with the same methodical precision he'd once used to plan military operations. The investigation took 4 months. Damon used his connections at Blackstone to conduct surveillance, document the affair, and uncover Joyce's background. The man was a successful corporate attorney with a clean record and deep pockets. Hardly the kind of enemy Damon had faced before, but an enemy nonetheless. What surprised him was Matt's reaction when the divorce proceedings began. His son, now 18 and about to graduate high school, chose his mother's side without hesitation. "You were never really here anyway," Matt had said during one of their last conversations. "Even when you were home, you were always somewhere else in your head. Mom deserves to be happy." The words cut deeper than any bullet Damon had ever taken. But worse was the knowledge that Matt wasn't entirely wrong. The war had changed him, left him struggling to connect with the peaceful world his family inhabited. He'd thought time would heal those wounds, but perhaps some damage was irreversible. The custody arrangement was brutal but fair, joint custody with Matt spending weekdays with Beth and weekends with Damon. But as Matt grew closer to his mother and her new boyfriend, even those weekend visits became strained and infrequent. Joyce had moved into the house within 6 months of the divorce being finalized. He bought Matt a car for his 18th birthday, a red Mustang that Damon's military salary could never have afforded. The message was clear: he could provide for Matt in ways Damon couldn't. But Damon had other skills. Skills that most people preferred to forget existed in their safe, suburban world. He began building files on everyone who had betrayed him. Beth's financial records, her social media posts, her work schedule at the real estate office, Joyce's client list, his business partnerships, his weekend habits. Even Chief Clayton, whose dismissive attitude toward Damon during the divorce proceedings had not gone unnoticed. And now, as Damon sat in the storage unit staring at 3 years' worth of accumulated intelligence, he understood that everything had been leading to this moment. Matt's disappearance wasn't an accident or a simple case of AWOL. It was connected to the web of lies and betrayal that had been spinning around Damon since his return from Afghanistan. The question was, what had Matt discovered that made him a target? Damon pulled out his secure phone, a device unknown to his ex-wife or her father, and dialed a number he hadn't used in 2 years. "Blackstone Security, this is Calvin Lynn." "Calvin, it's Damon. I need a favor." There was a pause. Calvin had been Damon's partner at Blackstone before a personality conflict with management had led to Damon's resignation. but their friendship had survived the professional split. Jesus, Damon. I heard about Matt. Any word from the police? The police aren't going to help, Damon said grimly. I need you to run a deep background check on Gregory Joyce. Everything, financials, phone records, travel history. And I need it off the books. That's going to cost you. I'll pay. Whatever it takes. Another pause. You sure about this path you're going down? Once we start pulling these threads. They took my son, Calvin. They're about to learn what happens when you corner a predator. Chapter 3. The Hidden Truth. The coffee shop on the outskirts of Millbrook was the kind of place that existed in the shadow spaces of small towns. Unremarkable, forgettable, perfect for conversations that officially never happened. Damon sat in a corner booth, his back to the wall and eyes on the entrance, as Calvin Lynn slid into the seat across from him. Calvin looked exactly as Damon remembered, compact and wiry, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of unremarkable face that made him ideal for surveillance work. He placed a manila envelope on the table between them, his expression grim. Before we start, Calvin said quietly, you need to know that some very important people aren't going to like you digging into this. Damon's expression didn't change. Define important. The kind who make phone calls that end careers. Calvin leaned back, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. Gregory Joyce isn't just some small-town lawyer, Damon. He's connected to the Torino family out of Boston. The name hit Damon like a physical blow. The Torinos were old-school organized crime, the kind of family that had survived federal crackdowns through careful political cultivation and strategic violence. If Joyce was connected to them, how connected? Damon asked. His law firm launders money for them through real estate transactions. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through shell companies and legitimate businesses. Calvin opened the envelope and spread several photographs across the table. These were taken last month at a restaurant in Boston's North End. That's Joyce having dinner with Anthony Torino himself. Damon studied the images. Joyce looked comfortable, familiar with the men around him. This wasn't a one-off meeting. There's more, Calvin continued. Your ex-wife's real estate office has been handling some very interesting property transactions. Warehouses, commercial buildings, residential properties, all purchased by LLCs that trace back to the Torino network. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. Beth's sudden affluence after the divorce, her new car, the expensive vacation she'd been taking with Matt. Her real estate business had supposedly been thriving, but Damon had never understood how a small-town agent could afford such luxuries. She's been washing their money, Damon said flatly. That's our assessment. And here's where it gets interesting. Calvin pulled out another set of documents. 3 weeks ago, someone accessed the Blackstone database using your old credentials. They pulled files on the Torino family, specifically, information we'd gathered during a federal investigation 2 years ago. Damon's blood ran cold. Matt, your son's been in trouble for 6 months, Damon. Academic probation, disciplinary issues with his commanding officers. But he's also been asking questions about his mother's business, about Joyce, about where all the money's been coming from. How do you know this? Calvin's smile was humorless. Because 3 days ago, he contacted Blackstone directly. He wanted to hire us to investigate his own mother. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too bright. Damon's mind raced through the implications. Matt had discovered his mother's criminal activities and tried to do something about it. That's why he'd disappeared. That's why the police chief, Beth's father, had been so quick to dismiss the missing person report. Where's the investigation file? Damon asked. That's the thing. Matt never made it to the initial consultation. He was supposed to meet with Sidney Elliott at our Boston office 3 days ago. Never showed. Damon absorbed this information with the same calm he'd once used to receive mission briefings in hostile territory. But beneath the surface, rage was building like molten lava beneath a volcano. You think they killed him? Calvin's expression was carefully neutral. I think your son stumbled into something bigger than he could handle. And I think the people involved have a lot to lose if he talks. Damon began gathering the photographs and documents, his movements precise and methodical. I need everything you have on the Torino connections. Financial records, surveillance photos, phone intercepts. Everything. Damon, listen to me carefully. These people don't just kill witnesses, they make examples of them. If you go after them directly, you're signing your own death warrant. Then I won't go after them directly. Damon's voice carried the cold certainty of absolute conviction. I'll go after them the way I learned in Afghanistan. Cut off their support, isolate their assets, turn their own people against them. And your ex-wife? Damon's smile was terrible to behold. Beth made her choice when she decided to betray her family for money. Now she's going to live with the consequences. Calvin leaned forward urgently. What about Matt? If he's still alive, then I'll get him back. But first, I'm going to destroy everyone who put him in danger. Damon stood, the envelope tucked securely under his arm. How long will it take you to get me the rest of the intelligence package? 48 hours. But Damon, 48 hours, Damon repeated. And Calvin, this conversation never happened. As Damon walked to his truck, his phone buzzed with another unknown text. Stop looking or join your son. This time, Damon didn't hesitate. He typed back, try me. The response came within seconds. Warehouse District. Pier 7. Midnight. Come alone. Damon smiled as he climbed into his truck. They thought they were setting a trap for him. They had no idea they were walking into one themselves. But first, he had preparations to make. The storage unit contained more than just surveillance equipment and files. In the back, locked in a gun safe that required both a key and biometric scanner, were the tools of his former trade. Weapons, explosives, communication gear, everything a special forces operator might need for an off-books mission. Tonight, Gregory Joyce and the Torino family were going to learn why Damon Velez had earned 3 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star, and why some lessons could only be taught in blood. Chapter 4. The Hunter's Preparation. The warehouse district of Millbrook had been dying a slow death for 20 years, ever since the paper mill closed and took half the town's jobs with it. Now it was a maze of empty buildings and rusted machinery, the perfect place for activities that preferred darkness and isolation. But Damon wasn't planning to walk into their trap blind. He spent the morning conducting reconnaissance, driving through the area in a rented sedan while using his phone to photograph every entrance, exit, and potential sniper position. The warehouse at Pier 7 was positioned at the end of a dead-end street, with the Millbrook River on one side and abandoned factories on the other. Classic kill box setup, one way in, no way out. At noon, he returned to the storage unit and began his preparations with military precision. First, the tactical gear, body armor, night vision goggles, communications equipment. Then the weapons, a silenced Glock 19, a tactical knife, and for insurance, a block of C4 with remote detonator. But the most important tool was his phone. Using Blackstone's resources, Damon had identified 3 key cell towers that provided coverage to the warehouse district. A small device, no larger than a cigarette pack, would allow him to intercept all cellular communications in the area for a 6-hour window. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Damon made another crucial call. Torino residence, this is Gertrude. I need to speak with Anthony Torino, Damon said, his voice completely calm. Mr. Torino doesn't take unsolicited calls. If you'd like to leave a message, tell him that Matt Velez's father knows about the Boston connections and wants to make a deal. The line went silent for several long seconds. When the woman returned, her tone was markedly different. Please hold. 15 minutes later, a gravelly voice came on the line. You've got brass, I'll give you that. Calling me at home. Mr. Torino, I believe you have something that belongs to me. And what might that be? My son. I'm prepared to be reasonable about getting him back. Anthony Torino's laugh was like grinding glass. Reasonable? You know what would be reasonable? You forgetting this conversation ever happened and going back to your quiet little life. That's not going to happen. Then you're stupider than your boy. He thought he could threaten us, shake us down for money to keep quiet about things he didn't understand. Now he's learning the cost of stupidity. The admission sent ice through Damon's veins, but his voice remained steady. I want proof of life. Then we negotiate. You're not in a position to make demands, soldier boy, but since I'm feeling generous, you'll get your proof tonight. Pier 7, midnight. And if you're thinking about bringing friends or playing games, remember that your son's continued breathing depends on your cooperation. The line went dead. Damon smiled grimly as he pocketed the phone. Torino had just confirmed everything. Matt was alive, they were holding him, and they felt confident enough to arrange a face-to-face meeting. That confidence was about to become their fatal weakness. At sunset, Damon drove to the warehouse district in his truck, but he didn't approach Pier 7 directly. Instead, he parked 3 blocks away and moved through the shadows on foot, using skills honed by 2 decades of military operations. The area was under surveillance, exactly as he'd expected. 3 men positioned at strategic points around the warehouse, all wearing dark clothing and carrying weapons. Professional, but not special forces quality. They were watching the obvious approaches, but had missed several tactical blind spots. Damon spent 2 hours in position, observing their patterns and identifying weaknesses. The sniper on the warehouse roof checked his phone every 15 minutes. The guard at the main entrance took a cigarette break on the hour. The rear guard had a habit of stepping away from his post to relieve himself behind a dumpster. At 11:30 p.m., Damon activated the cellular interceptor and began monitoring their communications. The device immediately picked up encrypted radio chatter between the guards and a command post inside the warehouse. "Perimeter secure," came a voice through his earpiece. "No sign of the target." "Stay alert," replied another voice, older, more authoritative. "This guy's military. He might try something cute." Damon's smile was predatory. They had no idea how cute he could be. Moving like a ghost through the industrial landscape, Damon approached the warehouse from the riverside, using an old storm drain that opened beneath Pier 7. The concrete tunnel was partially flooded and filled with decades of debris, but it provided perfect concealment. Emerging 50 feet from the warehouse's rear entrance, Damon could see lights in the windows and shadows moving inside. Through his night vision scope, he counted at least 6 figures in the main floor area. One of them was smaller than the others, seated in what appeared to be a chair. Matt. The sight of his son, alive but clearly restrained, triggered something primal in Damon's chest. But he forced the emotion down, channeling it into cold, tactical focus. Emotion got people killed. Precision kept them alive. As midnight approached, Damon was already inside the warehouse's electrical system, having accessed it through a maintenance panel on the building's north side. The C-4 was positioned on the main power transformer with a backup charge on the generator. When the time came, he would control both the light and the darkness. His phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number. "Walk to the front entrance. Hands visible. Any tricks and the boy dies." Damon typed back, "On my way." But he wasn't walking into their trap. He was walking into his. The cellular interceptor crackled with new activity as multiple vehicles approached the warehouse district. Through his scope, Damon watched as black SUVs took positions around the perimeter, disgorging additional men with military-grade weapons. Torino wasn't taking any chances, which meant Damon's plan was about to become significantly more complicated. But as he watched the enemy forces deploy around the warehouse, Damon felt the familiar calm that had carried him through countless operations in hostile territory. These men thought they were hunters, but they were about to learn the difference between hunters and predators. The difference was simple. Predators didn't just kill their prey. They made examples of them. Chapter 5. Into the Trap. The warehouse's main floor was a cathedral of shadows and rust, its skeletal framework casting complex patterns in the harsh light of portable floodlights. Damon entered through the front door with his hands visible, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. But his eyes were constantly moving, cataloging positions, distances, and potential cover. Gregory Joyce stood near the center of the space, looking remarkably comfortable for a small-town lawyer about to commit federal crimes. He'd shed his usual expensive suit for tactical clothing that made him look like a pretender playing soldier. Behind him, 6 men in dark clothing held positions around the warehouse, their weapons trained on Damon. And there, 30 feet away, was Matt. Damon's son sat zip-tied to a metal chair, his military haircut disheveled, and his face bearing the marks of recent violence. But his eyes were alert and focused, and when they met Damon's gaze, Matt gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Still alive. Still fighting. Welcome to the party, Mr. Velez," Joyce called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. "I have to admit, you're either very brave or very stupid to come here alone." Damon stopped 20 feet from the group, his hands still visible, but his body coiled for action. "I'm here to negotiate for my son's release. Let's get this done." Joyce laughed, the sound hollow and artificial. "Negotiate? You misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation, it's a lesson. Your son learned what happens to people who threaten our business interests. Now you're going to learn what happens to people who don't know when to quit." The only lesson here, Damon said quietly, is that you should have killed me first. The warehouse lights died instantly, plunging the space into absolute darkness. The backup generator kicked in 3 seconds later, but 3 seconds was a lifetime in combat situations. Damon had moved the moment the lights failed, rolling behind a concrete pillar as automatic weapons fire erupted around his last known position. The muzzle flashes strobed like deadly fireworks, revealing panicked shooters firing at shadows. But Damon wasn't where they thought he was. Using his night vision goggles, he moved through the darkness like a lethal spirit, the silenced Glock appearing in his hands as if by magic. The first guard died without knowing what hit him, the subsonic rounds barely audible over the shouting and chaos. Kill them both, Joyce screamed somewhere in the darkness. I want them both dead. The second guard fell as he tried to reach a light switch, his weapon clattering uselessly across the concrete floor. Damon was already moving again, using the warehouse's industrial equipment as cover while he systematically eliminated the remaining threats. But Joyce had been right about one thing. This wasn't just about Matt anymore. The cellular interceptor in Damon's ear crackled with urgent transmissions. We're taking fire inside. Unknown shooter, professional level. Lock down the perimeter. Nobody gets out. Where's the backup? We need backup now. Damon smiled grimly as he approached Matt's position. The boy had managed to tip his chair over and was using it as cover, exactly as Damon would have done. Good instincts. Dad. Matt's voice was rough but steady. I'm here. Damon cut the zip ties with his tactical knife, helping Matt to his feet. Can you move? Yeah, I'm okay. But Dad, there's something you need to know about Mom. I know. Damon handed Matt a backup pistol from his tactical vest. I know about all of it. Joyce, the money laundering, the Torino connection. We'll deal with it later. Right now, we need to get out of here. But as they moved toward the rear exit, the warehouse erupted in new gunfire. The backup teams were moving in, sealing off their escape routes with professional precision. They've got us surrounded, Matt observed, checking his weapon with military efficiency. Despite everything, Damon felt a surge of pride. The boy had inherited more than just his father's eyes. No, Damon corrected, we've got them surrounded. They just don't know it yet. The C-4 charges he'd placed throughout the warehouse district began detonating in sequence, each explosion precisely timed to maximize confusion and chaos. Windows shattered, car alarms screamed, and the night sky lit up with orange fire. In the pandemonium, Damon and Matt moved like shadows toward their real objective, not escape, but the complete destruction of the Torino network's local operations. The storage facility was 5 blocks away, and it contained more than just weapons and surveillance equipment. Hidden in the back corner were detailed plans of every Torino property in the state, every money laundering operation, every corrupt official on their payroll, including the location where they'd been processing their cash flows before moving it through Beth's real estate business. Where are we going? Matt asked as they moved through the chaos. To finish what you started, Damon replied, and to make sure they never threaten our family again. Behind them, the warehouse district burned like a vision of hell, and somewhere in that inferno, Gregory Joyce was learning that some predators hunted in packs. But the real hunt was just beginning. Chapter 6. The Network Unravels. The Millbrook Savings and Loan Building sat like a fortress of respectability on Main Street, its brick facade and brass nameplate proclaiming stability and trust. But at 3 a.m., while the town slept and emergency responders battled the warehouse fires, Damon and Matt approached from the building's rear alley. This is insane, Matt whispered as Damon worked on the security system's control panel. Breaking into a bank. Dad, this is federal. Your mother's been using this place to clean Torino money for 18 months, Damon replied, without looking up from the complex array of wires. Safety deposit boxes, shell accounts, cash deposits that disappear into business loans that never get repaid. The evidence is all here. The security system gave way to Damon's expert touch, skills learned during classified operations that officially never happened. They moved through the darkened bank like ghosts, navigating by memory and tactical flashlights. The vault was a different challenge entirely, its massive steel door protected by both electronic and mechanical safeguards. But Damon had been planning this operation for months, ever since his surveillance had revealed the true scope of the conspiracy against his family. How did you know about all this? Matt asked as Damon attached a small device to the vault's locking mechanism. Because I've been watching them since the divorce. Your mother, Joyce, your grandfather, all of them. Damon's voice carried the weight of betrayal and patient rage. I knew they'd try to destroy me eventually. I just didn't expect them to use you to do it. The vault door swung open with a barely audible whisper, revealing rows of safety deposit boxes and filing cabinets filled with financial records. Damon moved directly to box 247, using a key he'd copied months earlier during one of Joyce's visits to the bank. Inside were documents that would end careers and send dozens of people to federal prison. Wire transfer records, shell company incorporations, payoff schedules to local officials. But most importantly, there were photographs, images of Beth and Joyce meeting with Anthony Torino at various locations, shaking hands over briefcases full of cash. Jesus, Matt breathed as he examined the evidence. Mom's really in this deep, isn't she? Deeper than you know. Damon photographed every document with a high-resolution camera, uploading the images to secure servers as he worked. She's been the linchpin of their East Coast operation. Without her real estate business, they'd have to find new ways to move nearly $100 million a year. As they worked, Damon's secure phone buzzed with a message from Calvin Lynn, warehouse secure. Joyce and 3 others dead. Torino's people pulled back to Boston. You've got maybe 6 hours before federal response. Damon smiled grimly. 6 hours was more than enough. Pack everything, he told Matt. We're taking it all. Dad, I need to tell you something. Matt's voice was strained, heavy with guilt. I didn't just stumble into this by accident. I was looking for evidence against Mom and Joyce because I knew what they were doing to you. Damon paused in his work, turning to face his son fully for the first time since the rescue. What do you mean? The divorce, the custody arrangement, the way Grandpa treated you, it was all planned. Joyce wanted you isolated, discredited, so nobody would believe you if you ever figured out what they were really doing. Matt's hands shook as he spoke. Mom told me you were unstable, that the war had broken you, that we needed to be protected from you. But I started noticing things, inconsistencies in their stories. The revelation hit Damon like a physical blow. They hadn't just stolen his wife and son. They'd systematically destroyed his credibility and relationships to protect their criminal enterprise. When did you figure it out? Damon asked quietly. 6 months ago. I found some of Mom's financial records and started asking questions. That's when they told me you were dangerous, that you might hurt us if you found out about her new life. Matt's voice broke slightly. I believed them for a while. But then I realized they were more afraid of what you do to them than what you do to us. Damon felt something cold and final settle in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced before executing high-value targets in hostile territory. The time for mercy had passed. Is there anything else I need to know? He asked. Matt nodded miserably. Grandpa Ralph isn't just protecting them. He's on their payroll. They've been paying him to interfere with federal investigations, to lose evidence, to make problems disappear. That's why he wouldn't file the missing person report. He knew what happened to me. The last piece of the puzzle fell into place with sickening clarity. Ralph Clayton wasn't just a corrupt cop protecting his daughter. He was an active participant in a federal conspiracy that had ultimately led to his grandson's kidnapping. Matt, Damon said carefully, I want you to understand something. What happens next is going to be permanent. These people betrayed our family, threatened your life, and used their positions of trust to commit federal crimes. I'm going to destroy them all. Matt met his father's eyes without flinching. Good. As they left the bank with boxes of incriminating evidence, Damon was already planning the next phase of his operation. The warehouse attack had been about rescue and immediate tactical advantage. But the real war was just beginning, a war that would end with the complete annihilation of everyone who had betrayed his family. And Beth Clayton Joyce was about to learn that some mistakes could never be forgiven. Chapter 7. The Judas Kiss. The morning sun painted Millbrook in deceptively peaceful shades of gold and amber as Damon watched Beth's silver BMW pull into the driveway of their former home. She moved with characteristic elegance as she stepped out, but even from his concealed position across the street, Damon could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted nervously toward the windows. The warehouse fires had made the morning news. 3 dead, including Gregory Joyce. The official story was a gas leak explosion, but Beth knew better. Damon's secure phone buzzed with a text to her number. We need to talk. Coffee shop on Elm Street. 1 hour. Come alone. Through his binoculars, he watched her read the message, saw her face go pale as marble. She looked around frantically, as if expecting to see him emerging from the shadows. Then she got back in her car and drove toward town. The coffee shop was neutral ground, public enough to feel safe, private enough for the conversation they needed to have. Damon arrived first, choosing a corner table with clear sight lines to all entrances. When Beth walked in 37 minutes later, she looked like a woman walking to her own execution. She'd aged in the months since their last face-to-face encounter. The stress lines around her eyes were deeper, her perfect composure cracked at the edges. But she was still beautiful, still the woman he'd fallen in love with 22 years ago. "Hello, Beth," he said quietly as she sat across from him. "Where's Matt?" Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she placed them on the table. "I know you have him. Matt's safe." Which is more than I can say for Gregory. Beth's composure cracked completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she struggled to maintain control. "You killed him. You actually killed him. He kidnapped my son and threatened to murder him. What did you think would happen? We never meant for Matt to get hurt." The words burst out of her like a dam breaking. Greg just wanted to scare him, make him back off from asking questions. It was never supposed to go this far. Damon leaned back in his chair, studying her with the clinical detachment of a predator evaluating prey. "Tell me about the money laundering." Beth's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Bank records, wire transfers, shell companies, meetings with Anthony Torino." Damon pulled out his phone and showed her one of the photographs from the safety deposit box. "Should I continue?" The sight of the evidence destroyed her remaining defenses. She slumped in her chair like a broken doll, all fight drained out of her. "It started small," she whispered. "Just a few property transactions that seemed too good to be true. Greg said they were legitimate business deals, that his clients just wanted privacy. The money was incredible, more than I'd ever made in real estate. And you never asked questions?" "I didn't want to know." The admission came out like a sob. "We were happy, Damon. For the first time in years, I was actually happy. Greg treated me like a queen, bought me things you never could, took me places you never would. I didn't want to know where the money came from." Damon felt something twist in his chest, not quite pain, but an echo of old wounds that had never properly healed. "When did you find out about the Torino connection?" 6 months ago. Matt started asking questions about my business, about where the money was coming from. Greg panicked. He said we needed to discredit you completely, make sure nobody would believe anything you said if you ever figured out the truth. "So you made me the villain." Beth nodded miserably. "We told Matt you were unstable, that the war had damaged you, that you might hurt us if you learned about my relationship with Greg. We made him afraid of you, Damon. We turned your own son against you." The confirmation of Matt's earlier revelation should have filled Damon with rage, but instead he felt only cold satisfaction. Every betrayal, every lie, every moment of calculated cruelty, it all justified what came next. "There's something else," Beth continued, her voice barely audible. "My father. Dad's been taking money from them too. Protection money, to make sure investigations get buried, evidence disappears. He's in as deep as we are." Damon nodded. He'd already known about Ralph Clayton's corruption, but hearing Beth confirm it completed the picture. 3 generations of the Clayton family had betrayed their oaths, their family, and their community for money. "What happens now?" Beth asked. Damon reached across the table and took her hand, the same hand that had worn his ring for 18 years, the same hand that had signed divorce papers and laundered blood money. "Now you're going to help me destroy them all," he said softly. "Every contact, every operation, every corrupt official in their network. You're going to give me everything. And if I refuse?" Damon's smile was gentle and terrible. "Then you'll go to federal prison for money laundering, conspiracy, and accessory to kidnapping. Matt will testify against you. Your father will testify against you. And the Torino family will eliminate you as a loose end." Beth's hand felt cold and small in his, like a dying bird. "What do you want me to do?" "There's a meeting tomorrow night. Torino's people are coming to town to assess the damage and decide how to proceed. Your father is hosting it at the police station after hours." Damon's voice was conversational, almost casual. "You're going to make sure I'm inside when they arrive." "That's suicide. They'll kill you." "No," Damon corrected. "They'll try. There's a difference." As Beth sat across from him, tears streaming down her face, Damon felt the final pieces of his plan clicking into place. Tomorrow night would bring the reckoning he'd been preparing for since the moment Matt disappeared. And when it was over, everyone who had betrayed his family would understand the true cost of their choices. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The Millbrook police station stood like a monument to small-town authority on Courthouse Square, its red brick facade and white columns projecting an image of law and order that had become nothing more than an elaborate lie. At 11 p.m., the building was officially empty except for a single dispatcher and the night patrol officer. But Damon knew better. Hidden in the basement storage room, surrounded by boxes of old case files and abandoned evidence, he checked his equipment one final time. Body armor, weapons, communication gear, and most importantly, the digital recording devices that would capture everything about to happen. Beth had done her part perfectly, using her father's access codes to disable the building's security system and unlock the rear entrance. She'd also provided detailed floor plans and the exact timing of the meeting. Midnight, in the chief's conference room, with Anthony Torino himself attending via secure video link. The irony wasn't lost on Damon. His ex-wife was helping him destroy the very people she'd betrayed him for. But that was the nature of predators. When survival was at stake, they consumed their own. At 11:45, the participants began arriving. Through the building's internal cameras, another gift from Beth's inside knowledge, Damon watched Ralph Clayton escort 3 men in expensive suits to the conference room. The visitors moved with the controlled confidence of professional criminals, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. But they weren't scanning for the right kind of threat. At exactly midnight, the large monitor in the conference room flickered to life, revealing Anthony Torino's weathered face. The old crime boss looked every inch the predator he was, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and radiating the kind of casual menace that came from decades of violent success. "Gentlemen," Torino's voice crackled through the speakers, "we have a problem." Damon activated the recording devices and began moving through the building's ventilation system, a route he'd memorized during hours of reconnaissance. The ducts were narrow and uncomfortable, but they provided perfect access to the conference room. "The situation is contained," Ralph Clayton was saying as Damon positioned himself above the meeting. "Joyce and his team are dead, but we've maintained operational security. The federal investigation will find nothing but a gas leak explosion." "You're missing the point, Chief," one of Torino's men replied. "This isn't about covering up one incident. Velez knows about our entire operation. He has to be eliminated." Through the ventilation grate, Damon could see the 5 men seated around the polished conference table. Ralph Clayton sat at the head, trying to project authority he no longer possessed. The 3 visitors flanked him like vultures, their hands never far from concealed weapons. "My daughter says Velez can be reasoned with," Clayton said desperately. "He just wants his son back safely. We can make a deal." Torino's laugh echoed through the speakers like grinding glass. "Your daughter is the reason we're in this mess. Her amateur hour operation brought federal attention to our entire East Coast network. Beth's been invaluable to our operations," Clayton protested. "The real estate business has moved over $90 million in the past 18 months. And now it's burned," Torino snapped. "Thanks to her inability to control her own son. The whole thing needs to be shut down, along with everyone who knows about it." The implications hit Clayton like a physical blow. "You can't mean? Beth is my daughter. She's family." "Family doesn't threaten the organization," one of the visitors said coldly. "Your daughter and your grandson have become liabilities. They need to be resolved." Damon smiled grimly in the darkness above them. They were discussing the murder of his family with the casual indifference of men planning a dinner menu. It was exactly the confirmation he needed. "I won't let you hurt them," Clayton said, his voice shaking. "You don't have a choice," Torino replied. "The decision's been made. Velez, his son, your daughter, all of them disappear tonight. You'll retire quietly with your pension and keep your mouth shut, or you'll join them." That was Damon's cue. The ventilation grate crashed down into the conference room like a thunderbolt, followed immediately by Damon himself. He landed in a combat crouch, his suppressed pistol already in his hand, while the recording devices continued capturing every word. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said conversationally. "I hope you don't mind me dropping in. The room erupted in chaos as the three visitors reached for their weapons, but Damon had positioned himself perfectly. The first man died before his gun cleared its holster. The second managed to draw, but never got the chance to fire. The third dove behind an overturned chair, shouting into his radio for backup that would never come. Ralph Clayton sat frozen in his chair, his face pale with terror and disbelief. On the monitor, Anthony Torino's expression had shifted from anger to grudging respect. "Impressive entrance," the crime boss admitted. "But you're outnumbered and outgunned. My people have surrounded the building. Your people are busy dealing with the fires I set at your stash houses across town," Damon replied calmly. Amazing how quickly evidence burns when you use the right accelerants. The color drained from Torino's face. "You son of a bitch. Actually, that would be you." Damon turned his attention to Clayton, who was still sitting motionless at the conference table. "Hello, Ralph. We need to talk." The police chief's voice came out as a whisper. "You're going to kill me." "That depends entirely on how helpful you decide to be," Damon said. "You see, I've recorded this entire conversation. Your friends just confessed to conspiracy, money laundering, and planning multiple murders. That's life in federal prison, assuming you live long enough to stand trial." Clayton's face crumpled. "What do you want?" "Everything. Every name, every operation, every corrupt official in your network. You're going to help me destroy the entire organization, starting with the man on that screen." Torino's image flickered with rage. "You think this ends here? I have resources you can't imagine. I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." Damon smiled coldly. "You're welcome to try. But you should know, I've uploaded copies of tonight's recording to the FBI, the Massachusetts State Police, and the Boston Globe. By morning, your entire network will be front-page news." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Torino began to laugh, a sound like breaking glass. "You magnificent bastard," he said. "You've destroyed us all." "No," Damon corrected. "I've just given you what you deserve." As sirens began wailing in the distance, federal agents responding to the evidence packages Damon had transmitted, the crime boss leaned forward on the screen. "This isn't over, Velez. I'll find a way to make you pay." "You can try," Damon replied. "But you should remember something about predators. We don't just hunt our prey. We eliminate entire bloodlines." The monitor went dark, cutting off Torino's snarl of rage. In the sudden silence, Ralph Clayton began to weep like a broken man. But Damon felt no satisfaction in his father-in-law's tears. Some betrayals cut too deep for mercy, and some wounds could only be healed with blood. The reckoning was nearly complete, but there was still one final score to settle. Chapter 9, Blood and Judgment. Dawn broke gray and cold over Millbrook as federal agents swarmed through the town like avenging angels, armed with warrants and wire recordings that would reshape the criminal landscape of New England. The Torino network's East Coast operations lay in ruins, its key players either dead, arrested, or fleeing into the shadows. But for Damon Velez, the real reckoning was just beginning. He sat in his truck outside the house that had once been his home, watching as Beth loaded suitcases into her BMW. The federal raids had started at 5 a.m., giving her just enough time to pack the essentials before the asset forfeiture teams arrived. Everything else, the house, the cars, the expensive jewelry bought with blood money, would be seized as proceeds of criminal enterprise. Matt emerged from the front door carrying a single duffel bag, his face grim but determined. At 19, he'd seen more betrayal and violence than most men experienced in a lifetime. But he'd also learned the difference between justice and vengeance. "Dad," Matt's voice was steady as he approached the truck. "Are you sure about this?" Damon nodded toward Beth, who was placing a final box in her car, with shaking hands. "She made her choices. Now she lives with the consequences." The feds offered her witness protection in exchange for testimony. She could disappear, start over somewhere new, and leave her father to face the music alone. Damon shook his head. "Beth's many things, but she's not a coward. She'll try to save him, even though it's impossible." Through the windshield, they watched as Ralph Clayton's police cruiser pulled into the driveway. The former police chief looked like he'd aged 20 years overnight, his uniform rumpled and his eyes hollow with defeat. He'd been released pending trial, but everyone knew his career was over. Beth ran to her father, embracing him with desperate intensity. Even from a distance, Damon could see her shoulders shaking with sobs. Whatever else she was, she genuinely loved the old man. What happens to them now? Matt asked. Ralph will get 15 to 20 years in federal prison. The evidence against him is overwhelming. Damon's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. Beth will get 10 to 12, assuming she cooperates fully. Without Joyce's legal connections, they're both defenseless. And Grandpa Ralph's pension? Forfeited, along with his house, his savings, everything he accumulated through corruption. Damon turned to face his son directly. They'll have nothing left, Matt. No money, no influence, no protection. Just the consequences of their choices. Matt was quiet for a long moment, watching his mother and grandfather cling to each other in the driveway. Do you feel anything for them? Any regret? Damon considered the question carefully. 3 years ago, he might have felt pity or remorse. But betrayal was like acid. It burned away everything soft and human, leaving only the hard core of survival instinct. I feel satisfaction, he said finally. They destroyed our family for money. They turned you against me with lies. They put you in mortal danger to protect their criminal enterprise. Every tear they cry now is justice. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, federal agents coming to escort Beth to her surrender appointment. She'd agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency, but the cooperation would only delay the inevitable. The Torino network had been built on violence and betrayal, and it would collapse the same way. Beth looked toward Damon's truck one final time, her face a mask of grief and regret. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance, and he saw the woman he'd once loved. Young, beautiful, full of dreams about their future together. Then the moment passed, and she was just another criminal facing justice. Let's go, Damon said, starting the engine. We're done here. As they drove away from the house that had once been their home, Matt spoke quietly. What happens to us now? We rebuild, Damon replied. Somewhere new, somewhere clean. You'll finish your military service, maybe think about college. I'll find work that doesn't involve watching my family betray me. And Mom, do we just forget about her? The question hung in the air like smoke from the warehouse fires. Damon knew what Matt wanted to hear, that forgiveness was possible, that families could heal from anything, that love conquered all obstacles. But Damon had learned darker truths in darker places. Your mother chose money over family, he said carefully. She chose criminals over her own son. Those aren't the kind of choices you forgive, Matt. They're the kind of choices that define who someone really is. So we never see her again? That's up to you. But if you choose to maintain a relationship with her, you do it knowing exactly what she is. No illusions, no second chances, no forgetting what she cost us. They drove in silence through the autumn countryside, leaving Millbrook and its betrayals behind them. In the rearview mirror, Damon could see smoke still rising from the warehouse district, where Gregory Joyce had learned the final lesson of his life. Some people thought revenge was about emotion, anger, hatred, the need for satisfaction. But Damon had learned it was really about balance. When someone destroyed your world, you destroyed theirs. When someone threatened your family, you eliminated the threat permanently. It wasn't personal. It was just the natural order of things. His secure phone buzzed with a final message from Calvin Lynn. Torino found dead in his Boston penthouse. Apparent suicide. Network completely dismantled. You're clear. Damon smiled and deleted the message. Anthony Torino hadn't committed suicide. Predators like him didn't give up that easily. But the old crime boss had learned the same lesson as everyone else who'd betrayed Damon's family. Some men couldn't be threatened, couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be bought or broken. They could only be destroyed. Dad, Matt's voice broke the silence. I'm proud of you. For what you did, for who you are. I'm sorry I ever doubted that. Damon reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. You're my blood, Matt. That means something. It means everything. As they drove toward their new life, Damon reflected on the choices that had brought them to this moment. Beth had chosen money over family. Ralph had chosen corruption over duty. Joyce had chosen greed over wisdom. And Damon had chosen to be exactly what his enemies had feared he was, a predator who protected his own with absolute ruthlessness. In the end, it wasn't about forgiveness or redemption or finding peace with the past. It was about understanding that some betrayals could never be healed, only avenged. And some men were born to be the instrument of that vengeance. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.